After 3 years of listening to colorful adjectives like evergreening, zombie banks, lipstick on a pig, willful default, we finally reached the point where India's state-run banks have run up losses of $3.5 billion, and that's just in one quarter. Some claim that the worst has now been disclosed. Others argue that this is just the tip of the iceberg. Where's the truth? Is it somewhere in between? Joining us to talk about that is Pradeep Chaudhary, the former chairman of the State Bank of India, India's largest public sector bank; Abhisar Diwanji, partner and national leader financial services at EY; Prakash Agarwal, associate director and co-head of banks and financial ratings group at India Ratings; and Siddharth Purohit, senior equity research analyst at Angel Broking. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Mr. Chaudhary, the very simple question that everyone's asking at this point of time, after the kind of red that everybody's seen on the bank books, after all of this, is this now over? And if not, tell our viewers why so.
I'll just make a beginning by saying that you introduced State Bank of India as the largest
it
public
is the largest
sector
bank in the country. My apologies.
In fact,
Please,
it is the largest bank of the country.
Yes,
so,
sorry.
yeah. No, I think there is more pain in store. There is more pain in store, but it will not affect the public sector banks in a uniform manner. And because SBI, you would have seen that in spite of the difficult environment, SBI has still been able to keep its head above water. And whereas other public sector banks, including some biggies, relatively, Bank of Baroda and PNB, which people thought were a little different, have come to grief. And I think the private sector banks also do not walk on water. So what is visiting public sector banks, give it a quarter or two, I think you should not be surprised to see the same scenario playing out there. But in this, I will make a distinction from bank to bank. The banks which have a lower lending rate generally have a lower NPA. You look at SBI, it has a base rate of 9.30 and followed by HDFC Bank at 9.35 and ICICI at 9.35 and Axis again at 9.5, and other public sector banks have placed themselves at 9.6 and 9.75. So they are the ones who will accumulate more NPAs going forward and would have more grief coming. Wow. In fact, I'm happy that SBI pushed itself back from the precipice. In fact, it was not lowering the base rate when HDFC Bank lowered it, but I think good sense prevailed and they also brought down the base rate to 9.3 because that is the only way you can get good customers. And if you keep your base rates and lending rates higher, the more you lend, the more will be the bad assets.
Mr. Chaudhary, a quick follow-up question to you. In your first quarter in charge at SBI exactly 5 years ago, the May of 2011, you chose to conduct a full-scale and radical cleanup. That's the quarter the profit went from 3,200 crores to 20 crores. I'd like you to tell us why and whether the extent of that review and the fact that you did it and that was recognized as an honest look at the books and one that was appreciated by the market. In hindsight, should that have remained an active quarterly activity than a one-time one?
No, it was not a bad loan review. This was a deficit in provision for pension.
Okay.
The bank before me had underprovided pension to the extent of about 10,000 crores. Now, if I had taken a hit of 10,000 crore in one quarter, you know, there would have been chaos and there would have been all kinds of problems in the market. So we spoke to RBI, and RBI, we said that we'll declare a nominal profit, take the pension hit, and subsequently Government of India capitalize the bank and then the pension hit could be taken. So that was something very different. That was not emanating from asset quality, but that came from under provisioning of pension liability. I hope that is behind us. So it didn't happen after that. But subsequently, we in SBI were more aggressive in detecting, declaring and providing for NPAs. And much of the accounts which are now being declared by others, SBI had been much more proactive even earlier. And in fact, at that time, people were saying that why do you have to be holier than thou? And why do you have to, declare and declare and make this kind of disclosures? But we said, when in doubt, please disclose. And that is my grievance with RBI, that RBI was never strong or never insistent with the banks then, in the last 3 years, that you please detect, disclose, and don't be complacent. RBI woke up only in the third quarter of this year, and that is why all these problems have got aggravated, accumulated, and hit us in one stroke. Had RBI been a little more proactive and seen this thing coming from last 2 years, I think the effect would have spread out and it wouldn't have hit all at the same time.
Prakash, the very last point that Mr. Chaudhary just made, that all of this has gotten accumulated in the last few quarters, and that's turned pretty much what's being reported. How can we move to a structured long-term set of guidelines that allow for a rolling and continuous marking to market, so to speak, of asset value?
No, asset value, it's not asset value.
You see, I mean, the stress in the books, it's a responsibility of the bank concerned to actually reflect, and while RBI can nudge and suggest the bankers, but it's a responsibility ultimately of the bank themselves to transparently report what is there in the books. So to that extent, yes, it's more of a corporate governance issue, I believe, that if the third party of the RBI has to push banks to report transparently what is the stress on the book, then I guess we need to tighten the systems of reporting, and more transparency needs to be built up. Coming on the point of, in terms of stress, I just wanted to point out in the sense, while the banks have reported pretty serious numbers in fourth quarter, we think that stress in the books is much more deeper. If you see the results, we did one study sometime in September last year, and we thought that our estimate was that almost 21% of the bank's lending book, borrowers in that sense, in terms of value, were somewhat stressed. And the way we calculated that was, with ICR less than 1.5%, 1.5 times, debt to market cap of less than 20%, market cap to debt of less than 20%, debt to EBITDA of more than 5 years. So we did this kind of study. So and the number which came out is pretty staggering. It's almost showed that almost 21% of the total banking-wide system book was somewhat stressed. So now what we are seeing is just a manifestation of that. It's getting reflected, which was there always in the book. So what we think that, while a part of this has been reflected now, we think that this pain will continue for a few more few more quarters to come. So while incrementally the stress may not be building up, but the reflected numbers will continue to remain high. We don't see this pain easing anytime soon in the next few quarters.
Prakash, I want you to say that again for our viewers. You're saying 21% of the entire banking system and not just the state-owned banks. Am I right?
Yeah, of the system. So it's almost about 13 trillion, 12 to 13 trillion, INR is what is stressed, if you see in terms of capacity to repay. And the way we arrived at was, we took bottom-up approach. We almost did about 18,000 corporates, and we tried to analyze in terms of where do their ICR, market cap to debt, debt to EBITDA, where do they stand? And on those parameters, almost like 20% of the bank debt of the banking system would look like somewhat stressed. Yeah.
Siddharth, the last 4 months, for the first time, as Mr. Chaudhary also mentioned, some of this pain is now very visible on a few of the large private sector banks as well. I'd like to understand what you're telling your clients. Stay away from either one half or this set of the market as a whole, or is there enough value and disclosure now to step in and take a measured call?
See, in the last 2 quarters particularly, there has been more disclosure and more recognition of stress asset. But just to tell you that this problem was already there. It was only a matter of recognizing those assets as NPA and doing the adequate provisions on that. It is only after that RBI came out with AQR, then all these banks started recognizing those accounts as NPA and started providing it. Now, if you go back to those numbers of the large corporates which are into, let's say, commoditized business, or maybe metals, or maybe a couple of cement companies, their interest service capability was already under a lot of stress. So it was very evident they would have fallen into NPA. So it was never a doubt that the large corporates, some of the big accounts were supposed to fall into NPA. But probably it was the right move on the RBI's part to ask the banks to provide it on time and clean up the balance sheet. But what we believe is that say the large part of the bigger accounts are already recognized, but there might be even more, or maybe it may not be the equal size in terms of absolute slippages, but there are number of mid corporates also, or even in the large corporate, which are not part of the AQR, which can fall into NPAs going ahead. Now, if you talk about the disclosure, now virtually all the banks, including private and PSU, have come up with a so-called watch list, and everybody also, I mean, all the management feel that close to 50% in some cases, and in some cases 70% of those watch lists will fall into NPAs. So it is clearly indicating that in the provisioning requirement will remain on a very high side for next at least 1 year on a minimum side.
But Prakash, okay. Yeah. We also have Abhisar Divanji of EY joining us now. Abhisar, Mr. Chaudhary earlier made the point that the RBI has pretty much back-ended its steps in AQR in 525 and the JLF mechanism for banks to start acting as a consortium. Is there a case that had these requirements not been made and companies just report what they're asked to report by the regulator and the market regulator, would we have not seen any of this pain disclosed to investors, to shareholders, had the RBI not stepped in? And if that is the case, what does it say about the longer term structure that's in place for reporting asset quality in this country?
So, arguably, that had the RBI not put in the stricter, I'm sure the NPA would not have kind of come up, right? And because we had a kind of policy where we tried to restructure through a CDR mechanism. CDR mechanism actually had a forbearance in terms of provisioning. So obviously it wouldn't have come up, and the problem would have got delayed.
Okay.
Had it come out at some stage, yes.
Right.
And one of the reasons why it came out today, of course, is RBI action.
Right.
The other thing is also the prolonged stress globally and in India.
Correct.
So, you know, these short-term measures can only stay for a period of time. Beyond a point, you will see some signs of distress coming about, and I think frankly the RBI picked it up at the time when these distress signs were coming up, and the system was getting prolonged. Okay. So I think it's a question of economic factor as well as of course RBI, but primarily of course RBI. Coming to the long-term sustainability, I think there is a culture change that's happening among banks now. So banks have now realized that these kind of shocks are not something that they can take every time. But today, frankly, banks are reeling under so much of a shock that frankly we see a lot of early warning investments happening now. Really? So banks are investing a lot in early warning systems. Of course, RBI is mandating them, so banks are also doing it. And there is a conscious effort to move beyond just an evergreening type restructuring.
Fair enough. On that note, we'll take a break. Mr. Chaudhary, Abhisar, Prakash, Siddharth, stay with us. We'll just be back in a minute. Welcome back. You're watching our coverage of the NPA stress and the fact that at the end of this earnings season, India's public sector banks have run up $3.5 billion of losses in just one quarter. We're in conversation with Pradeep Chaudhary, Abhisar Divanji, Prakash Agarwal, and Siddharth Purohit. Coming back to you, Mr. Chaudhary, earlier in the show you were a bit critical of the RBI acting late. Standing where we do today, what more would you want to see them do? What's left to be done?
See, there are very simple things that can be done, and I am surprised that RBI officials are attending so many international conferences, international meetings, but they learn nothing from the international regulators, particularly from the regulators of enlightened or, what are called OECD countries. Start with that, leave this subjective analysis of which account is, going to be performing or not. Ask every bank to give a statement of their total corporate advances according to credit rating. So any credit rating which is BBB plus or lower, that is below investment grade, so you get a clear idea that how much of low quality, low rated loans each bank is carrying. And even RBI wants banks to, allocate capital according to the external credit rating. If that is done, the analysts don't have to, break their head trying to figure out what this means. Secondly, I think RBI has been taken in by what Gandhiji used to call the basic goodness of man. that a man will do everything right and nothing wrong. So in that case, we won't need traffic lights at the intersections, because if you believe that every motorist or every automobile driver wants to avoid a crash, so he doesn't need a traffic light. But unfortunately, the world does not work that way, or fortunately, the world does not work that way, and RBI has completely abdicated its function of oversight. Globally, the regulators, in fact, having worked in international scenario, globally the regulators keep a check that if there is an account A which has borrowed multiple from 9, 10 or maybe 20 banks, they make sure that the asset classification by each of the lender banks is uniform. And in case they are not able to come to a uniform consensus, the central bank or the regulator steps in and says, this account I think is inherently weak, no matter they may have serviced the interest somehow, but we want you to make a minimum provision of 10%, 15%, 30%, whatever think is appropriate. RBI has not done any of that. And even today, there are large number of accounts which are provisioned differently and differentially in different banks.
Mr. Chaudhary, allow me to stop right there, because this point I want to bring up and round up the end of our conversation with, and I'll come back to you on this point. And a slight variation to it. For right now, Abhisar, would you argue for something like a credit default swap, that kind of product as a hedge or an insurance for some of these banks to take care of some of this risk, or the lesson from 2008 would argue that stay away from all of that?
Credit default swap, is a good instrument, but I don't think that really is an answer to what we're talking about. I think what Mr. Chaudhary also alluded to is, I think we need to have the risk culture in the country and a governance culture in this country. I don't necessarily agree with the fact that we lacked governance, but I think we surely lack skill. And I think credit default swaps, etc., are good mechanisms, but at the end of the day, they are also, and that passes on credit risk from one person to the other. It doesn't do anything more than that. That's right. I think we need to deal with the systemic risk issue, which is more important.
Prakash, the government is arguing that there are sections and parts of the economy that are improving, those that were under stress. The finance minister and Mr. Gadkari make the argument that the road sector is seeing a turnaround. The power minister and the finance minister again argue that there is a push that's being made in the power sector where discoms will turn around. Is this being seen on the ground, and will this see any consequent impact in some sort of loosening in the stress that the banking sector is seeing in lending to those areas?
Certainly, the improvement in economy and some of the sectors which you mentioned are, heavy capital consuming sectors. Certainly, any improvement in these sectors would certainly, would have favorable impact on the bank's asset quality. Having said that, while the steps are being taken, it will be some time, and with some lag, we'll see the the impact being reflected on the bank's book. So while the steps are taken, there are certainly positive steps, certainly welcome steps in terms of, those are slightly delayed but much more required steps which were required. Given the way economy is, and to some extent the assets which we are seeing in the bank's book is partly the economic situation and not moving of projects is somewhat responsible for that. So certainly all these steps which the government is taking, if those results in some sort of push from the on-ground activities, those certainly should be positive for the bank, but I think that will certainly impact with certain lag. It's unlikely that in next 1 year we would see those impacts reflecting in the bank's book. So it could be some time before we see benefits of that percolating to the bank's book.
Siddharth, historically you used to have a metric for measuring valuation, which would be a price to book value kind of valuation that used to be attached to banks. Given the fact that there is so much volatility in what that is there another way where you say, okay, we don't know whether these are banks that are at right now, whether they're cheap or not, whether they present any value or not?
See, more than price to book value, obviously we look at adjusted book value, wherein we basically adjust the net NPA. But more than the valuation, what investor would like to know, or maybe how the PSU banks or banking sector as a whole are going to report profitability improvement, whether the ROA and ROE is going to improve here onwards. That will be the point of re-rating, or maybe appreciation for this kind of stocks. So purely looking at book value may not give a real indication whether actually it's a value buy or not. So with the dynamic scenario, maybe the valuations also has to, the type of valuation also has to change. And now the qualitative parameters will be taken more into account, just rather than looking at book value and buying a stock. So from that point of view, PSU banks are still we feel that are still not really cheap. Maybe it might go up a little bit, but until unless there is a substantial improvement in the asset quality and return ratios, maybe the valuations will be under pressure. That's what we believe.
My last couple of questions, the penultimate one to you, Abhisar. The government's arguing, saying, look, this is how much recapitalization we're willing to do, the rest of it, pick it up from the market. Is that balance fair? Do you think the government will have to step in with more, given whether the market could be risk averse to putting in that kind of money in this to these companies and to these banks?
Well, fundamentally, I am against the concept of a budgetary allocation trying to meet the banking sector's capital requirement.
Right.
So the whole concept of this PSU bank, frankly, a great concept when relevant, but not relevant anymore, simply because that India is a budget deficit country. We are not a deficit. And the only way our economies revive is when the economic growth happens. Economic growth is fueled by banking growth or asset growth, asset creation. And frankly, if you don't have the capital to grow that and dependent on a deficit budget to grow that, that itself is a problem. So fundamentally, that's an issue. So the government is, I think, giving what it can give as part of its budgetary allocation. But I don't think that amount is enough today for banks to stand alone on their own and get out capital. Unless, of course, BBB is successful, where bank managements change, where we find that the long-term sustainability or growth or profitability of the bank is going to come in and the markets realize that, then we'll be able to raise external capital. But I think we are a bit far away for that.
Mr. Chaudhary, the final word to you, and I'm going to pick up on the fact that you find that the RBI hasn't managed this entire situation well. And I'm going to close this with a very controversial question. Is there a case for splitting the role of a banking regulator and a central bank and give that to two different entities, as there is in the rest of the world? You have the FDIC and the Fed in America. You used to have the FSA and the BOE in England. Is there a case to make such a segregation, or is this best in the hands of one entity?
I think we should not put the cart before the horse.
Okay.
And the issue of the bank's book value, even if you look at the book value of Bank of America, the share is trading at 75% of the book. Citibank is also trading at a discount to the book. But the basic thing is that the public sector banks, if they are not adequately capitalized, they would not be able to get deposits, and the capital will flee from India, as it has done in the countries like Russia. So that is something the government would have to be worried about. And even in case of Unit Trust of India, which was not strictly as a bank, the previous NDA government did everything possible, and I think put in about 25,000 crores to keep it alive, and some of it came from the public sector banks itself. So this will go on, and even in Greece or even in UK, they could abandon every activity, they could privatize every activity, but even the UK government today could not privatize or could not say that, sorry, Royal Bank of Scotland, I am not giving you capital. So that's a big dilemma. It's easy to argue in the studios, but for the government, it cannot afford to have a closing down of financial institutions and banks. In US, they have put billions of dollars in keeping afloat the savings and loan companies, and all over the world it is being done. And I think this recapitalization business would be more efficient if the government recapitalized the DISCOMs rather than trying to recapitalize the banks. So you give money to DISCOMs where the problem is, rather than give medicine to the patient, but you are giving medicine to the doctor, thinking that the patient will get the medicine transmitted from the doctor. So the patient is the DISCOM. So you recapitalize the DISCOMs, they become healthy and they don't become a drag on the banks, and the situation would be much better.
All right, Mr. Chaudhary, we're completely out of time on that note. We've had a number of quality suggestions that have come in. We've had other very frank assessments of whether this has been managed well or not. Thank you all 4 of you for making time for this. It looks like this is not going anywhere, and we'll continue this focus. For right now, we're completely out of time, and thank you for watching. Let me now go over to Siddharth. We are minutes away from the GDP data for the fourth quarter for FY16. Siddharth, take it over.
Well, thank you, Kaushik. And as we await the data, it's very clear that some of this data is about sentiment and actualities of a quarterback, but the reality is that the bigger worry is what you were just discussing, the banking NPA issue. But for our viewers, Q4 FY16 as well as the full financial year data shortly expected within a matter of seconds now. We are counting down. If you had a clock on your screen, you will see that clock would be ticking down. What is at stake here? Basically, 5 key headline items that we need to look out for. One is, of course, the headline GDP number. The second is what the picture that we get about industrial growth. The third is our farm sector, agriculture, the big one there when it comes to farm output. Private consumption, again, huge indicator, especially when it comes to urban consumption. And then you, of course, have capital formation as in terms of the investment, largely which has been driven by public investment in the current recent context that we have to look out for. Various estimates, the GDP number that you can see on your screen, estimate suggesting 7.5%. 7.9%, and that's it. We have the number here, 7.9%. If I heard that right, and if we can get that up on our screen, Q4 GDP coming in, it has expanded 7.9%. That's the number on your screen, and we are going to go across to our guest, Indranil Pan of IDFC Bank, Gaurav Kapoor of RBS, and Shaugato Bhattacharya. And if our guests are on with us, but the big number really is 7.9%, beating expectations. The sort of consensus poll economist estimate was 7.5%. Arvind Panagaria, the vice chairman of the Niti Aayog, had just a few days back last week given us a number of 7.8%, trending towards 8, and therefore you have this a Q4 GDP number that's coming. Let's try and get